We live in a world obsessed with happiness. You feel it every time you scroll through your feed, the beaming smiles, perfect vacations, motivational quotes, and relentless optimism. It's everywhere, and it's overwhelming. But there's a strange paradox here. The more we're told to be happy, the more anxious, dissatisfied, and even depressed we become. Why is that? Why does a society that has invested billions into the so-called happiness industry seem to be more miserable than ever?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let me take you on a journey that starts with one of the darkest yet most brilliant minds in Western philosophy, Arthur Schopenhauer. He believed that life is suffering, that desire leads to pain, and that happiness is not something to be chased but something to be quieted. Right now, what you're about to experience is not just a philosophical lesson, it's a confrontation with something we've been trained to avoid: discomfort, emptiness, and the brutal truth behind the smile. Imagine this: you're standing alone in an empty room. There are no distractions, no music, no phone, no one to talk to. Just you and your thoughts. How long could you last before reaching for your phone? Before the silence becomes unbearable? That discomfort, that inability to just be with ourselves, is the very symptom of the disease the happiness industry pretends to cure. And Schopenhauer saw it coming centuries ago. He wrote, "A man can do what he wants, but not want what he wants." This is where our story begins. You don't choose your desires. They arise in you, uninvited, like waves crashing against the shore. And the happiness industry? It doesn't question your desires. It amplifies them. It monetizes them. It convinces you that your fulfillment lies just beyond the next purchase, the next app, the next self-help seminar. But what if all of that is a lie? Let's dig deeper. The happiness industry operates on a dangerous premise that happiness is a product, that it can be measured, optimized, and sold. You're told that if you just follow the right steps, morning routines, gratitude journals, breathwork apps, you'll finally arrive. But where exactly? That's the question Schopenhauer would demand you ask. Because to him, happiness is not a state we reach. It's the brief absence of pain. He said, all happiness is of a negative kind. Think about that. When you're sick, you crave health. When you're broke, you crave money. But once you get what you want, the pleasure fades, and a new desire arises. The treadmill never stops. So what if the very structure of our desires is flawed? What if the pursuit of happiness is what's making us unhappy? Close your eyes for a moment. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt truly content, not excited, not entertained, but deeply at peace? Can you even remember it? That's the lie the happiness industry sells you, that excitement equals happiness. But excitement is just stimulation. True contentment, Schopenhauer would argue, comes when the will, the endless craving engine inside us, is silenced. And here's the twist. The industry doesn't want you to be content. Because if you were, you'd stop buying. You'd stop scrolling. You'd stop needing. And that's bad for business. So it feeds you an illusion. It tells you that happiness is just one more goal away. You become addicted to progress, to optimization, to self-improvement. But improvement toward what? Toward becoming a better consumer? Let's pause. What if, Instead of chasing more, you practiced wanting less. What if the root of your suffering isn't that you don't have enough, but that you want too much? Schopenhauer said, "The safest way of not being very miserable is not to expect to be very happy." That sounds bleak, doesn't it? But maybe it's the most liberating idea you'll ever hear. Because when you stop expecting happiness to arrive like a prize, you begin to notice something else. Small moments, a breeze through the window, the weight of your body on the chair, the silence between thoughts. These aren't marketable. They aren't sexy, but they're real, and they're free. And most importantly, they don't rely on anything outside of you. Now here's a question that might haunt you. What if everything you've been taught about happiness is not only wrong but deliberately designed to keep you unfulfilled? What if the system doesn't want you to be happy? Because a happy person doesn't consume. A content mind doesn't need distraction. A quiet soul doesn't obey. This is not conspiracy. This is structure. This is capitalism merging with psychology and branding itself as self-care. This is the commodification of your inner life. And Schopenhauer warned us, the will to live, the blind force behind all our desires, is not rational. It's not even personal. It just wants. And the more you feed it, the stronger it grows. So if you feel like no achievement ever satisfies you, it's because it was never meant to. So how do we escape? Not by chasing more, but by seeing clearly. By stepping back from the noise and asking, who am I without my desires? Who am I when I stop trying to become something else? This is where Schopenhauer intersects with Eastern philosophy. He admired Buddhism for its rejection of desire, its embrace of suffering as a path to awakening. And maybe that's the antidote. But let me be clear, this is not about giving up. It's about waking up, about realizing that happiness isn't something you chase. It's something you uncover when you stop running, when you sit with your discomfort, when you turn off the noise, when you dare to be still. Try this. Spend 10 minutes today doing absolutely nothing. No phone, no music, no goals. Just sit. Feel the itch to do something. Notice how quickly your mind rebels. That is the will. That is the machine that the happiness industry exploits. And when you see it clearly, you can begin to disarm it. The real revolution isn't external. It's internal. It's not about changing your life. It's about changing your perspective. And Schopenhauer offers us the mirror. He doesn't sugarcoat the truth. He forces us to confront it. And in that confrontation, there is power. Because the industry will keep selling you answers. But the deepest truths can't be bought. They're found in silence, in solitude, in the willingness to suffer without escaping. And yes, it's hard. Yes, it's uncomfortable. But maybe that's the point. Maybe happiness isn't the goal. Maybe peace is. And maybe peace only comes when we stop believing the lie that happiness is something we can possess. Maybe peace comes when we accept that life is pain, and that's okay. So I ask you, what if your suffering isn't a problem to solve, but a teacher to listen to? What if the discomfort you feel is not a signal that something's wrong, but that something real is trying to break through? Let that question linger. Let it shake you. Because in the next part, we're going even deeper. We're going to confront what happens when you stop chasing happiness and what you find in its place. So here we are. You've taken the first step, stopped, paused, questioned. And something inside you, perhaps for the first time, has begun to whisper, "What if I've been chasing the wrong thing all along?" That whisper is not weakness. It's the beginning of awakening. Because once you see the illusion, you can never unsee it. Now let's go deeper. What happens when we stop chasing happiness? What fills the void left behind? It's a terrifying question because most of us have built our entire identities around the pursuit. If we remove that, who are we? What are we for? Schopenhauer offers an answer that's as unsettling as it is profound. Maybe we're not meant to be happy. Maybe the entire premise is flawed. He writes, "Life swings like a pendulum backward and forward between pain and boredom. Pain when we desire something, boredom when we finally get it." Think about your own life. How long does the thrill of achievement last before you're restless again? How often does a fulfilled desire simply give birth to another, slightly more sophisticated one? This is the human condition. We are built to want, not because we are flawed, but because we are alive. The will to live, in Schopenhauer's view, is not just a biological force. It's metaphysical. It's the hidden engine behind everything from the growth of trees to the ache in your chest when you feel lonely. And this will is blind. It doesn't care about your peace. It just wants to perpetuate itself. Now imagine a society that takes this blind will and monetizes it. That's the happiness industry. It doesn't want to free you from the will, it wants to decorate it. Wrap it in apps, dress it in luxury, package it as personal growth. But underneath the packaging, the wheel keeps spinning. You feel it, don't you? That subtle anxiety, that low-grade dissatisfaction, even in moments of success. That's the will whispering, more. And here's the trap. The more you feed it, the more it grows. Each layer of desire becomes more refined, more socially acceptable. First you wanted money. Then you wanted purpose. Then you wanted to live your best life. But what if even purpose is another distraction? Another illusion sold to you by a system that needs you to keep moving, keep buying, keep meeting? Schopenhauer would say, stop. Just stop. Look at where your desires come from. Are they yours? Or have they been implanted by family, media, advertising, culture? You think you want success, but who defines success for you? You think you want happiness, but what image are you comparing yourself to? That influencer? That friend with a seemingly perfect life? Here's a brutal truth. Comparison is the fuel of the happiness industry. Without comparison, you wouldn't feel inadequate. You wouldn't need to fix yourself. And if you didn't feel broken, you wouldn't buy the cure. So the system creates the sickness, then sells you the medicine. And yes, all of us, we participate. We post, we scroll, we compare. We become both the victims and the agents of our own unhappiness. But what if you chose a different path? Not the path of passive rebellion, but of radical awareness. What if you began to see desire not as something to fulfill, but as something to observe? This isn't easy. It requires real courage, because to observe desire without acting on it feels like dying, like letting go of a part of yourself. But maybe that part was never really you to begin with. This is where Eastern thought and Schopenhauer align. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises from attachment to things, to outcomes, to identities. And the path to freedom is not through acquisition, but through renunciation. Not necessarily of possessions, but of illusions. Illusions like, I'll be happy when you've said that before, haven't you? I'll be happy when I get the job, the relationship, the house, the breakthrough. But the when never arrives, or if it does, it's fleeting. Why? Because the mind doesn't want peace. It wants stimulation. And the happiness industry thrives on this neurochemical loop. You get a hit of dopamine when you achieve something, and then the baseline resets. Back to wanting, back to craving, back to scrolling. We forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people, said Schopenhauer. That's the cost of fitting in, of chasing the same shiny goals as everyone else. But what if you chose discomfort over conformity? What if you let go of the race, not because you failed, but because you saw through it? Here's a thought experiment. Imagine a world with no advertising, no social media, no cultural pressure. What would you want then? What would you do with your time? Who would you be? If that question terrifies you, you're not alone. Most people don't know, because we've outsourced our desires. We've let others tell us what to want, and then we wonder why we're unfulfilled. But awareness changes everything. Once you begin to watch your mind, your cravings, your reactions, you step outside the machine. You become the observer, not the puppet. And in that moment, something miraculous happens. The will begins to lose its grip. You start to see happiness not as a pursuit, but as a byproduct of presence, of stillness, of being fully here without needing anything to be different. Try this. Next time you feel a craving, whether for food, attention, success, pause. Don't act. Just watch. Ask yourself, where is this coming from? What am I trying to escape? You'll start to notice a pattern. Most of our desires aren't about gaining something. They're about avoiding something. Loneliness, boredom, emptiness. But what if you stopped avoiding? What if you walked straight into the emptiness? It's in that void that truth emerges. Not the kind you read in books, but the kind you feel in your bones. The kind that breaks you and rebuilds you. Schopenhauer didn't offer comfort. He offered clarity. And clarity is a kind of freedom. When you see that the will is endless, you stop trying to satisfy it. And when you stop trying to satisfy it, you begin to experience peace. This is not nihilism. It's realism. It's the recognition that life contains suffering, and that's okay. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to cover it with positivity or numbing distractions. You can hold it. You can sit with it. And in that sitting, something opens. A stillness. A quiet joy. The kind that doesn't depend on circumstances. Let me ask you something dangerous. What if your suffering is sacred? What if it's not a malfunction, but a message? A call to wake up, not to a better version of yourself, but to the truth of who you already are beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the constant craving? That's the path Schopenhauer points us toward. not through more, but through less. Not through success, but through surrender. Not through happiness, but through honesty. And here's the twist. When you stop chasing happiness, you begin to feel something deeper. Gratitude. Not the kind you force through journaling, but the kind that arises spontaneously when you stop resisting reality. You look around and think, how strange and beautiful it is to be alive, even with all this pain. That's not the kind of happiness the industry can sell you. That's real. That's yours. So the next time you feel that familiar ache, that sense that something's missing, don't reach outward. Burn inward. Sit with it. Listen, it may be the beginning of your liberation. In the final part, we'll confront the ultimate question. If happiness isn't the goal, then what is? What does a meaningful life look like in the absence of illusion? And how do we begin to live it right now? So now we've arrived at the edge. You've questioned the illusion. You've stared into the void. You've begun to see that happiness, as it's sold to you, is a distraction, a golden carrot dangled just far enough away to keep you running. But if happiness isn't the goal, what is? What is a life worth living when all the promises of success, fulfillment, and joy feel hollow? Schopenhauer doesn't hand us easy answers. He doesn't offer a 5-step formula or a morning routine to fix your life. Instead, he points us toward a deeper, more radical question. What is the meaning of your suffering? Not how to escape it, not how to mask it, but how to understand it. Can you look at your pain, your longing, your emptiness, and see it as a teacher rather than an enemy? This is where the journey turns from philosophy into transformation. Because once you stop chasing happiness, you begin to cultivate something far more powerful, wisdom. And wisdom does not glitter. It doesn't trend online. It doesn't come with a dopamine rush, but it lasts. It deepens. It holds you when everything else falls apart. Schopenhauer believed that the highest form of human existence was not in achieving worldly success, but in transcending the will of the blind, the endless craving that dominates most of our lives. And how do we do that? Not through indulgence, but through detachment. Not through more pleasure, but through compassion, creativity, and contemplation. Let's talk about compassion. Schopenhauer saw it as the moral core of life. Not because it makes you feel good, but because it connects you to something beyond yourself. When you see another's suffering and feel it as your own, the will weakens. The ego softens. You step out of your own desires and into a shared human experience. That's not happiness, it's something deeper. It's meaning. And meaning is what the happiness industry can never sell you. Because meaning isn't a product. It's a practice. It grows in silence, in suffering well met, in the moments when you choose presence over distraction, truth over comfort. And here's the paradox. When you stop trying to be happy, you become more open to joy. Not the ecstatic, Instagrammable kind, but the quiet, enduring joy that arises when you're no longer at war with what is. Ask yourself this: what if your life doesn't need to be spectacular to be sacred? What if your worth isn't measured by your achievements, your followers, your lifestyle, but by your capacity to sit with reality as it is, without flinching? That's real strength. That's real freedom. And freedom is the ultimate rebellion. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom from wanting. The freedom that arrives when you see through the game and stop playing. That doesn't mean you withdraw from life. It means you engage with it fully but without clinging, without needing it to be something else. Schopenhauer wasn't naive. He knew life is hard. He knew that suffering is baked into existence. But instead of pretending otherwise, he looked it in the eye. And in that gaze, he found clarity. He found a kind of peace, not the absence of pain, but the absence of illusion. That's the peace we're pointing toward. A peace built not on the shaky foundation of temporary highs, but on the solid ground of inner stillness. And stillness is something you cultivate. You don't find it in a product. You find it in practice, in returning again and again to this moment, to the breath, to the body, to the now. The happiness industry doesn't want you here. It wants you in the future, in the next purchase, in the next breakthrough, the next better version of yourself. But this moment, this quiet, ordinary moment, is the only place where life actually happens. And ironically, the only place happiness ever truly existed. So how do you live this? How do you live a life that's not built on illusion? First, you slow down. You stop running. You stop chasing. You let yourself be bored. Be still. Feel the itch of craving and don't scratch it. This is where the inner work begins. Second, you simplify. You begin to strip away the unnecessary, the noise, the distractions, the endless optimization. You ask yourself, what do I actually need? You may find the answer shocks you. Third, you serve. Not in some grand, heroic way, but in small, quiet ways. Helping someone without being seen. Listening without giving advice. Being kind without expecting anything in return. These are the acts that undermine the ego, that weaken the will, that open the heart. Fourth, you observe. You watch your mind like a scientist. You notice the patterns, the compulsions, and the stories, and you begin to question them, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Is this true? Is this mine? Do I need this? And finally, you surrender, not in defeat, but in trust. You stop trying to control everything. You stop trying to force life to meet your expectations. You let go. And in that letting go, you touch something vast, something nameless, something that doesn't scream or sparkle, but that holds you with quiet, unshakable presence. This is the path Schopenhauer invites us into. Not a path of despair, but of depth. Not one of avoidance, but of awakening. And it's not easy. It's not marketable. But it's real. Let me ask you one final question, the kind that can change your life if you let it. What if the goal is not to feel better, but to see more clearly? What if your pain is not a problem, but a portal? What if your cravings are not flaws, but clues? What if your emptiness is not a void to be filled, but a space to be honored? You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to chase a dream that was never yours. You only need to return to this breath, this body, this moment. And in doing so, you remember what the happiness industry wants you to forget, that you are already whole, already complete, already enough. Schopenhauer didn't promise bliss. He promised truth. And truth, when faced directly, has a power beyond pleasure. It transforms. It liberates. It brings you home. So maybe the real question is not how to be happy, but how to be free. Free from illusion. Free from craving. Free from the endless hunger that defines modern life. You've made it this far. You've asked the hard questions. You've faced the uncomfortable truths. That in itself is rare. It's sacred. It's the beginning of something extraordinary, not loud, not flashy, but real. Take that with you. Let it seed in your heart. Let it grow in silence. Let it guide you not toward happiness, but toward reality. Because in the end, reality is enough. It always was. And that is the truth the industry never wanted you to know.